Hello again. All right, let's talk about A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. I am going to post two videos on this, just so I don't post one long one. This first one will talk about dramatic structure, and in the next one, I will very briefly talk about A Raisin in the Sun in terms of the critical theories to give you some practice applying those critical theories to a very specific play, because I know my introduction to them was not applied to anything specific, so I'll do that then. All right, A Raisin in the Sun, Broadway, 1959, an extremely important play. I used to have everybody read A Dollhouse by Henrik Ibsen as an example of very traditional dramatic structure, but for numerous reasons, I now probably for the foreseeable future will be having students read A Raisin in the Sun instead, and I've been doing that for a while now because I think it's important for diversity for the class, but also because it is just a really good textbook example of very traditional dramatic structure. If you don't know A Dollhouse, you should. It was mentioned in the history lectures, if you remember that. Anyway, Dollhouse is an extremely important play. A Raisin in the Sun is different for many other reasons that you read all about in the intro. And anyway, so Raisin in the Sun, very traditional. The linear cause to effect Aristotelian, straightforward, chronological structure. One thing happens, another thing happens, no skips back and forward in time, very little skips in time. So very, very traditional. So when we, in the script analysis lecture, all that stuff we were talking about, what's traditional, this is it. What is the stasis? The father has died. The insurance check is coming. What else do we know? Everything we know about them. I'm not going to go on and on forever about what stasis is, or this video would be an hour long. We know that Walter and Ruth have been married for a while. We understand that they were once happier than they are now. Mama and Walter Sr. moved into this house, into this apartment, thinking they would live there not very long, and so what have you. So their son Travis is a good kid. Benitha, Walter's sister, Mama's daughter, we know all about her. So the stasis, really important, really good example, because you might be tempted to think otherwise. It's a good example of pointing out the difference between plot and story. They're getting the check. That's part of the stasis. So the fact that Walter Sr. died and therefore the insurance settlement is going to be this $10,000, that's part of the story. It's not part of the plot. We don't see that happen on stage. We only hear about it, and it happened a while ago. So what is the inciting incident? This depends on your interpretation of the play in some ways, just as when I talked about trifles. But to say that when the check comes, that's the inciting incident, I don't think that is the best choice, because we know it's coming, and when it comes, nothing changes. What some of the first lines in the play are, has the check come yet? So we know it's coming. When the check comes, nothing changes. So there's this stasis of things would not change unless something happened. And that something is the inciting incident or the intrusion. So I feel like the best option for the inciting incident is Ruth passing out. Often it's, as I've said, it's easier to look at structure and identify the climax first, because that's probably really easy to identify. There might be some debate in this play, but I think it's pretty clear that the climax of the play is when Walter tells Mr. Linder, we are moving into your neighborhood. So when we think about that, again, with Ball's analysis, looking at things backwards, we wouldn't have gotten there probably if Ruth hadn't passed out. If Mama Mama was still, if you look at the conversation between Ruth and Mama, she was still, yes, when Ruth pressed her and what do you think you're going to do? And she was like, maybe we'll buy a house. Well, I feel like the thing that pushes her to buy that house and therefore drives the entire rest of the plot, because if Mama didn't buy the house, then the rest of the plot wouldn't happen. The thing that pushes Mama to do that is Ruth passing out. Because when Ruth passes out, Mama knows that Ruth is pregnant. Um, you could say Mama buying the house is the inciting incident, but then something so theatrical, I remember when in Ball's analysis, important things happen in theatrical moments. Something so theatrical as somebody passing out on stage, that's just too much to be part of the inciting incident. That is something happening. So, and also, Mom buying the house comes just a little bit too late in the story. The idea, it doesn't always happen this way, but the idea is that in the stasis, and I shouldn't say in the stasis because you learn about the stasis all throughout the play. You could find out a new fact about something that happened a long time ago, and that's still part of the stasis, but we as an audience don't learn about it until the very end of the play. So you have to read the whole play to understand the stasis. Now, I got off my train of thought. Ruth passing out drives Mama to buy to buy the house. So if Mama's buying the house was the inciting incident, then that means that nothing happens until she does that. The beginning of the play up until the inciting incident, basically everything is in stasis, which means things don't move, things don't change. So that's what I think is the inciting incident. And then a lot of things happen because of that. In the next slide, we'll look at things backwards because of Ball's analysis. I think the point of no return, which is an extremely important point. So you remember because Walter has called Mr. Linder over there for the second time, and he's prepared to sacrifice what he really believes is right and accept his money, let them be paid off so they don't move into this neighborhood. Well, when he's standing up in front of Linder, what does Mama do? She makes Travis stay and watch. I think Ruth says, you go out and play, Travis, because Ruth doesn't want Travis to see his father succumbing, giving in to this racism, and she doesn't want Travis to see Walter to give in. But then when Mama makes him stay, and that's what drives him, that's what gives him the courage, that's the oomph that makes Walter say, we're moving into your neighborhood, we don't care what you think. So, and then we have a new stasis after that. They're packing up and they're moving. Just want to add that if you watch the movie, which you should, it's a good production. The movie does differ a little bit from the play. There's an extra scene in there where one of the neighbors comes and visits another female character, which is not in the original play. And in the movie, we get to see it almost feels like it's another day where they're packing up to go, as opposed to the play itself. The play pretty much ends when Walter tells Mr. Linder off. So by saying that the climax is Walter telling Mr. Linder off, what happens in this play? Walter becomes a man. The simple textbook definition. What happens in A Raisin in the Sun? Well, a lot of things happen. They buy a house, they get a check, they argue. Beneatha goes on a date, she gets clothes from her friend from Nigeria, blah, 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 blah. But the event of the play is Walter becoming a man. There's a lot of debate, I shouldn't say there's a lot of debate, but it's interesting to sit back and ask yourself, who is the main character? And as you read some of the information that's in the script that I gave you that's after the play, there was some strife. Is Walter the main character or is Mama the main character? In a prior production, it was definitely directed as if Mama was the main character. In the Broadway production with the star playing Walter, he really expected it to be about him, which all actors should. At the end of the day, if you're a spear carrier, you still think that play is about you. But as an audience member, looking at things holistically, as an audience member, as a producer, as a director, analysis for the script, more specific than actor analysis. Who's the play about? Walter is the most dynamic character, although, as Ball says, I do agree that these characters really don't change. Their situation certainly changes, but they don't change. Ask yourself, would Walter, at the beginning of the play, if you could have thrown Walter into that situation he is at the end of the play, where he would man up and he would do what is best for his family, do what he really believes in, would he do that at the beginning of the play as well as he should at the end? Yes. I believe that characters don't really change, but their circumstances do. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule. So let's think about it a little bit more specifically in terms of the concepts that Ball threw out at us. If you look at things backwards, that can really give us some insight. So as Ball would have us do, I made a list of everything that happened. This is just the first beat of the play. As I said, when I direct a play, I make a list of everything that happens. Now, some of these things are just minor activities. Some of them kind of have to happen, but still they happen, and they are important to what the play is about, to the way the play is written, to the way that I would tell this story as a director, to the way that I would work with my actors to tell this story, and the designers and everybody. So in the first beat, we get all this stuff that I'm not going to read because it'll just take more time, and you can pause this and read it on your own if you want. Things like Travis going to the bathroom. Sure, it happened because his mom woke him up and made him go. Now, is it this big dramaturgical moment? Perhaps not, but perhaps it points out that they have to share a bathroom with other tenants in this building, and that says a lot about the play. So here's the list of things. Let's look at Ruth. I'm pointing like you can see me here. Ruth is scrambling the eggs, even though he says he doesn't want scrambled eggs. So think of that activity backwards. Ruth scrambled the eggs. Well, we'll think of Walter asking, she says, what kind of eggs do you want? He says, not scrambled. What could Ruth do in response to that? She could do many things in response to that. She could scramble them as she does. She could make them over easy. She could make them some other way. She could do what he wanted. She could decide not to make eggs because he's being too difficult, what have you. If you looked at it backwards, she makes eggs. What is that in response to? Him saying, I don't want scrambled eggs. She makes scrambled eggs in response to him saying, I don't want scrambled eggs. That tells us a lot about what's going on in the lives of these people, especially what's going on with Ruth. We know it's really interesting to look at all the stuff that happens in the first beat because we really, Walter himself asks Ruth many times, what's wrong with you today? And we find out later she's trying to decide whether or not she's going to have an abortion. But nobody knows that yet. So that's definitely a big part of the stasis. Ruth is pregnant. And then again, probably an easier way to look at, so again, this is just the first beat. I didn't do the whole play because it would take 45 hours to put that on a slide. But just to give you an idea of how defining actions can work for a director or for an actor. So let's look at the going backwards thing just 1 minute more. So when we think about Mama buying the house, as I said before, so Ruth passing out, if Mama buying a house is a response to that, what could happen due to Ruth's passing out? Many things could happen. She could have told Walter. Mama could have told Walter that, hey, your wife's with child again. She could have told Benitha, and they could have planned. Many, many different things could have happened. But, so if you look at Mama buying the house, what precipitated that event, and that's the way Ball would have us analyze things by going backwards, what precipitated Mom, what was the camel that broke the back that made Mama decide to buy the house? Knowing that Ruth was pregnant. And Hansberry did an amazing bit of writing by revealing that to us by having Ruth pass out. Other things, quick things before we wrap up this lecture with the Ball's analysis. Remember, he always says to think about the title. Well, there was a lot of discussion about the title. We know it's from Langston Hughes' poem, but I'm gonna massacre it, so I'll just summarize it. What happens to a dream deferred? It shrivels up like a raisin in the sun. So, what's the play about? It's about dreams. It's about dreams. And it's really interesting. I think it's beautiful how this play and we'll talk about it with African American theory, will is an extremely important part of the African American literary canon as well as the African American theatrical canon. And it's really kind of a beautiful connection that she connects one of the most important African American poets in her play, and not just by saying, "Oh, this play is dedicated to blah blah blah," or having a little quote in the play as she does before it starts, but she names the play, and I think that just makes my heart happy. Ball says things are about family relationships. Well, duh, this play is very much about family relationships. What's the unique factor? What's special about today? Well, the check's coming. Hansberry creates this really important situation where that's what's unique about today. They're getting the check. Could you change the setting of this play? Ball talks about, if you're going to change the setting, make sure you put it in a setting that is similar to the way the original audience would have received the original setting. I think that would be difficult. Sure, there are still plenty of African Americans in the south side of Chicago who are really trying to better themselves, who are having a difficulty, that have to rely on something horrible like the death of a spouse or a father in order to get the settlement to be able to better your lives. Sure, you can. It would be a little tricky and sure, there might be a white guy who came to their house and tries to buy them out so they don't come into their neighborhood. Sure. Could you set this with a different race? And we'll talk about this more when we talk about postmodernism. Yeah, it would be a very different play. It would not be the same play. I think this play is a very important historical document, not only for the story it tells, but for the time it was written. And we'll talk about that more with Marxist analysis. So yeah. So that's a little bit about the structure. Trying to make this really short because we're going there next in the next video. Didn't want to take up too much time with this because I hope as you were reading it, you were realizing, oh, this is that traditional stuff. If by chance you're watching this video before you read the play, that's great. That's fine. As you're reading it, think about, oh, how does this wonderful playwright give us all the background information? How does so much of that come in early? How much of that background information trickles in later throughout the play? This play is traditional in that so much of the background information we know does come before the inciting incident. But we also learn new things along the way. Yeah, so that's script analysis and Raisin in the Sun. Next video, I'll apply the critical theories. So, bye!